Hello, it's Tess here. So this is a video about, I have to switch positions. All right, so this is a video about the song Lessons. I think it's called Lessons, um, which you have probably heard by now if you're watching this. And so I just wanted to give some behind the scenes on what that song means to me, where it came from. And where it came from, when I say that, I mean two really distinct things. So number one, like what the lyrics mean. Not all of them. Some of them are really obvious. So some of the deeper meanings of the lyrics, and then also where I found my inspiration, like sort of physically, what kind of space I had to take myself into for that song to come out. And it's my hope and intention by doing this video that more people will find more ways to really access their own creative genius and birth what needs to be birthed from them into the world. Because really, at the end of the day, if you don't do it, no one will, right? Because even though I have a belief that what comes to me comes from the universe, like it's not mine, I also have a belief that if I don't actually put it out there, then there's a good chance that nobody will. And I have to have some amount of faith that if a song comes to me from the universe, it's because, and if I feel pulled to share it, it's because it actually needs to be shared, because somebody out there needs this music. And I know that, you know, as a sort of normal human being who has listened to music my whole life, there are songs that have changed my life. There are songs that have saved my life and touched me in ways that I never could have dreamed possible. So without judging the muse, right, or without judging ourselves, we can actually separate our ego from the music that comes through us, or from the creation that comes through us, and just let it be and trust that it's going to reach the people it needs to reach in the world. So that song is one of the first songs that, maybe even the first song that I finished in a way that felt really right to me, in a way that felt like, now I've got it and it's not going to change. And it was originally inspired by the song Nyepi by Nako Bear and Medicine for the People, which is a song that in summer 2017 I was dancing to on a daily or multi-daily I've just completely lost the word. Anyway, I was dancing to daily or multiple times a day. So funny. So I think that while I was dancing to Nyepi, I was always singing along, and I was often changing the words to make the song suit me, and specifically my sort of, so the summer was really a time for me to, I learned so much about the feminine and what it means to embody the feminine, and I was really calling the goddess into my life, which I think a lot of that comes across in the song. At least I hope it does. And so I was often changing the words to suit what I felt was more like the feminine energy. And I realized one day that I really just wanted to rewrite the lyrics entirely for me and my story. So first, I actually did that. I have a completely different song that is literally just like to the same exact music as Nyepi, and the same rhythm and the same whatever. And basically, as far as I remember, almost as soon as that came out of me, the song Lessons came out of me, which is actually quite different from Nyepi. So it follows some similar patterns. You can tell that it's definitely, well, I can tell that it's definitely inspired by Nyepi, but it's different. It's quite different. The rhythm is different. Yeah, to me, it is quite different, but it just came from that place of like letting the first stuff come out of me, letting that flow. And dance is definitely one of the ways that I accessed the creative muse that flows through me. A mentor of mine once said, the goddess resides in the hips. And for me, learning how to put myself into my pelvic bowl, into my hips, into my womb space, whatever you want to call it, has been hugely a part of my creative journey, and my journey to really owning that I'm a creative person. Because for most of my life, I said I wasn't, and I only started songwriting in 2017. And suddenly I had like 20 songs. So basically, as soon as I owned it and said, yeah, I'm a songwriter, then it was true. So some of the pieces of this song that I would like to talk about in more depth are, okay, there's the ancestral piece, the connection with ancestors and matriarchal ancestors. So there were 2 guided visualizations that I did within a year of one another. One of them was to connect with all of my ancestors, and the other one was specifically to connect with matriarchal ancestors. Actually, maybe within 2 years, because the one that I first did to connect with ancestors, that was a while ago. I don't remember when that was. That might have been a couple of years ago, but it was really powerful. So in addition to this video, I'm also going to create those 2 guided visualizations. Actually, I think I'm going to roll them into one. So I'm going to create one guided visualization for you if you would like to connect with that ancestral love and wisdom and power, and learn a little bit about what it is to release ancestral trauma, because that's another piece of this song. So in the song, I talk about, we connected with ancestral lineage, matriarchal love, all the suppression thereof, and I know, we have the power to heal this. We are the ones we're waiting for. I'll stop there. So I'm talking about specifically connecting to matriarchal ancestry and understanding and really getting it, like really having like a full body download of that understanding that nobody ever meant to pass on trauma or shame or fear, right? It's a colossal misunderstanding. It's a mistake. And yet it's also just human. It's just perfect because this is just how we are. And at the same time, we know now that we have, so when I say we have the power to heal this, like we know all about epigenetics and neuroplasticity. So in short, I'll just like tell you exactly what I mean. So all human beings follow a path of action, and I won't go through the whole path of action. It's in another video of mine, so you can go and find that video on the path of action. But basically what happens is if we don't let out a feeling, so feelings just are energy that come into our bodies. If we don't let them out, our bodies, which are these extraordinary, amazing vessels, will hold on to the feelings until we're ready to let them out. But of course, a lot of the times we don't know how, we haven't been educated, we've lived in shame, we've been oppressed for our lives, or lived in silence, as I talk about in the song, and I'll get more into that later. Or it's not, we're not safe to be vulnerable, to release feelings, or stuff happens to us that we don't even cognitively, like we're not even cognitively aware of it. It just affects our lives in different ways. So there are a lot of reasons why we end up holding on to this trauma. And when we do, it's actually passed on to our children, to our descendants, to our children and their children, and so on. And what we know now is that this trauma is actually held in the fascia of our bodies, but we can release it through feeling it and through movement. And I mean, lots of people use different things, right? There's the 10F process, there's EFT, there's the healing code, there's dance and song and artistry and creativity and journaling, and whatever it is for you, there's a lot of different ways to release trauma. But releasing trauma actually changes our epigenetics. So we're actually completely capable of healing and changing our own epigenetics with neuroplasticity. So through neural rewiring, which just takes time and habit and practice, we can actually release trauma and heal ourselves, right? For our descendants, for ourselves, for the glory of whatever, our families and the human race. So that is specifically what I'm talking about there. And to me, like, that's a game changer. That's a game changer. If you have the power to heal yourself, Well, why wouldn't you? Because it's scary and ego and all that. I know. But anyway, that's me. Why wouldn't I? Of course I'm going to. For me, there's a piece of responsibility here, which is that if I know that this can be done and I recognize a trauma, then I have the responsibility to work on healing that trauma. And I've done a lot of work with a lot of different things. Money, sex, food are some of the big ones in my life and in my family. And I think in a lot of our families and lives in this culture. That's not it, of course, but for me, those are like the big three of 2017. So I wanted to talk also about the words or the phrase, I've known silence, I won't be silent. So this is actually pretty, it might be self-explanatory, but basically it's that I learned in my life through no fault of any, like this isn't, I'm not blaming anybody, right? It's just, this is how things happen. Again, colossal misunderstanding. So I learned in my life not to speak up because I believed that I would be silenced, or I believed that I would be in danger, or I believed that I would be shamed or ridiculed for speaking my own truth or for singing or whatever. So as a child, I learned those lessons and I learned them really fiercely. And when I was 34, I did a lot of work around, well, just self-awareness and understanding who I am so that I can go from a place of strength in who I am and use the skills and the lessons that I have learned in my life experience that are unique to me. So, you know, what I learned when I was doing a lot of work on myself was that I had judgments on myself and who I was deep inside, like who I was at my core. I had judgments on those things. So I was silencing myself, right? So I learned it as a child, but what I did is I held on to it even as I entered adulthood and beyond. And I maintained a silence that isn't healthy for me and certainly isn't healthy for the people around me. And so this song is also very much about, you know, I'm powerful when I ask for what I want. It's very much about getting clarity on what I need and then asking for it. And it's still something I have to practice constantly and remind myself of constantly, because I have a lifetime of learned habit and neural wiring that says, don't speak up, you know, or don't ask or whatever, right? So I have experienced in my life speaking my truth or asking for what I want and being blamed for it or being shamed for it or actually having physical violence enacted on my body. So it, of course, is a really important lesson, right? The things that are the most difficult tend to be the most necessary. And for me, speaking up is absolutely fundamental to my core. Expressing myself is fundamental to who I am. Sharing my experience is fundamental to who I am. Singing out loud is fundamental to who I am. All of these things make me who I am, and I had a judgment on them for most of my life. So that's that. And I have a lot of different techniques for practicing speaking my truth and maintaining, you know, what is true for me and my authentic self and my boundaries and things like that. So I'm going to, in addition to the meditation on connecting to matriarchal ancestry, and that meditation is also really about healing the mother wound. Like, it's a disconnect that many of us have between us and our mothers. And healing that wound is, in my experience, really, really powerful. So in addition to that, I am also going to release a technique that has helped me. At least one. I'm actually thinking I might do two techniques that have helped me get clarity on my own voice and my own needs, as well as I will be just describing in brief the practice of self-responsibility, which for me has been one of the most groundbreaking things that I have learned, just a skill in knowing that I can speak my truth from a really empowered place and from a place that doesn't tend to trigger other people. So actually, I think I'll just describe that here. So self-responsibility is more or less just speaking from I, from the I, right? So I believe, rather than, and like, I feel this, or this is what's coming up for me. So instead of speaking like, this is true and that's true and these are facts, what we're doing is we're actually speaking facts, because the fact is that I believe something. The fact is that I have a unique reality, and that this is what I'm experiencing in my body. So if I'm in a conversation and I feel triggered, where I am triggered, then I can go to a place of, like, okay, can we just pause for a moment? This is what's coming up for me. And I understand that you didn't put this trigger here. You just happened to press the button, and it's not your fault, but I want to let you know what's coming up for me. I'm feeling a lot of anger right now, and I'm feeling a lot of frustration, because when I hear the words, blah, 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 I'm making this up off the top of my head. So, when I hear the words manipulative bitch, like, I sense that, like, well, I'm frustrated, and I feel really hurt and sad, and I'm not sure that I feel like you've asked me to clarify, and I feel like you're making assumptions about me and what my intentions are right now. So can I ask you what your intentions are right now? So it's just a really quick example of how I might respond in a really self-responsible way, using like, this is what's coming up for me and I. It's way easier, in my experience, to hear that, or for other people to hear me say that, than like, how dare you, you did this, you did this, you did this, which is also just not helpful, because the more aware of ourselves we are, really the more empowered and the more accepting of ourselves we can be. Is there anything else that I really wanted to say in that zone? Started to move my hips and found a trauma inside, and found the knowledge inside of a trauma in my body, but not my mind still remembered. Started to let it out. So those words are also really about how movement can really access trauma that is stored in the tissue of our body, right? In the fascia of our body. And that's what happened to me. I was learning how to belly dance, and suddenly I was just completely overtaken by this huge grief, this huge frustration. And I do not know what is the cause of that grief. And it doesn't matter. I don't believe it matters at all. What I did is I sat in it. I sat in the feeling, and I started to let it out, right? So it's basically just saying, like, I had this grief, and it might even have been about the fact that my whole life I wanted to dance, and I silenced myself, and I never asked for it, and then I believed all sorts of things about it, like that I was too old to do it, which is one of the things that this song is talking about. And movement, and body work and massage and osteopathy, and there's all sorts of different things that can help us actually access these triggers that are stored in our body. And so if you've watched the video on the path of action, then you know that it's really vital to let ourselves feel the things that we haven't been feeling. So if we run away from those feelings, like if something comes up for me and I'm like, oh, I don't want to feel that, and I shove it back down, it's going to stay in my body, and it's going to come out sideways in addiction, depression, anxiety, and so on. And heart disease and physical illness. And I mean, these things are all linked. So started to let it out means I let myself feel it, and I moved, and I cried, and I let myself release a grief that maybe wasn't even mine. That's another funny thing about these, right? Sometimes it's not ours. It can be our ancestors that we're holding on to. It's not my fault, it's my lesson is maybe the last thing I want to touch on. But I want to say, like, please feel free to ask me questions about any of the lyrics in that song, because I'm really happy to share. This is who I am. I love explaining the background, the emotional and psychological and mental and physical and spiritual background of what comes out of me and where it all comes from. That's just who I am. If you're into astrology, then you'll understand that my rising sign is Cancer and my moon is in Virgo. So I'm really emotional, and then I want to understand where it all comes from and analyze it to death. So please ask me questions if I'm missing something that you'd like to know more about. It's not my fault, it's my lesson is actually a line that I find incredibly difficult to get through without crying, because the meaning to me behind it is that, it's never our fault what we learn in this lifetime. It's never our fault what circumstances we're in, or, like how our I sort of have a belief that, you know, like our soul chooses what we're going to learn in a lifetime. And I believe that in this lifetime, my soul has chosen to learn self-empowerment, real self-empowerment, not to be identified by other people or let myself, you know, fall into that hole, but to identify myself for myself powerfully and be really self-empowered. And it's not my fault, it's my lesson, is a reminder to me and everybody, I hope, who hears this song, that there is no need to blame ourselves for learning things in life. It's the purpose of being. I mean, I believe it's the purpose of us being here in these mortal bodies and on earth, is to play and learn about ourselves and learn, you know, whatever we can, whatever we feel is, you know, that we really struggle with the most. And so it's a reminder to me not to blame myself for my circumstances, which comes up in other songs too, because it's so important to me. But that, you know, there is no fault. There's no need to blame. There's no need to self-blame, especially because if we're willing to learn from our circumstances, especially, and be accountable to ourselves, then that's something to be hugely proud of. And it's so common in our society that we've learned to be ashamed of making mistakes, of not learning like immediately, of whatever. In my life, for sure, I learned the lesson of, you know, that it was shameful to ask for help, and that it was shameful not to get it right the first time, or even the 10th time or whatever. I learned that there was shame in that. I learned a shame about not being competent. And just to clarify, what I mean by shame is like really the deep-seated belief that there's something wrong with me. Shame is a deep-seated belief that there is something wrong with you. Not that you've done something wrong. That's guilt. Guilt is, I did something wrong, but I can make it better, or I can apologize, or I can whatever. Like, it's a transactional thing. It's a one-time thing, and you can make it better, and you can apologize. Shame is, there's something wrong with me at my core. And shame is known as the #1 blocker of growth. We cannot grow from that place. So it's really quite useless. And it's one of the reasons that it's so important to me to speak up. And I actually have a song called Shame that I will talk about in another video, because it's you know, it's something that deserves talking about. It doesn't really exist in the light. It only exists in the shadows when we're quiet about it. And when we talk about it, we often discover that we're sharing the same shame as so many other people. We can really connect to each other through this. So it's not my fault, it's my lesson. It's a reminder to me not to feel shame about the lessons that I've learned. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say for now. And again, if you have any questions about the song or anything that I've said in this video, please post them below. I'm so excited to share this with you, and I'm really excited to see where it takes us all, and just excited to share my journey and my learning. Oh, and I said that I was gonna, well, I'll do that in a different video. Talk about a little bit about my process in receiving the song, receiving the inspiration. Actually, I kind of did, because this song was so simple. It was like, yeah, I mean, it was inspired by Nyepi, and then I just let myself get out all these words that came, and then this song came, and it was actually one of those things that was really quite easy for me. And that's because I was dancing. So dance and letting it just all flow out as many times as it took. And then of course, you know, I sang it a million times until it was perfected, so to speak. Until it was finished, complete. That's the best word. That's the word I'm gonna use, until it felt complete. So anyway, I love you so much, and thank you for being here with me. And I hope that you have learned something, or something here has been helpful to you, and I will see you in the next video.